Hi, this is Craig Lane with video blog week 12 of 2013 of healthalchemy.com, HEALTHALKEMY, healthalchemy.com. And I'm Craig Lane, going for week 12. Today we're going to be talking about duality. And one of the things about duality is that as a person many years ago that sought to find enlightenment and become enlightened, one of the things that I kept bumping up against was my own mind and relationship. I recently saw a talk by my teacher, Duality, and he was presenting a talk on the dilemma of relationship and how one of the aspects of duality is that we have a relationship at all times. There's a relationship with ourselves, and then relationship with others, relationship with nature. And the funniest one that I find myself giggling about, as Eckhart Tolle did many years ago, is when I say I'm having a relationship with myself, who's the I and who's the myself? There's a very interesting conundrum that comes out of this, in that we notice that there's something that is aware and there's something that we're, or it is aware of. Object, subject. So in other words, I'm looking at a camera. I, subject, looking at the object, the camera. You, as the listener, are receiving me, and something's aware of that. And I'm reminded of an old saying, an old question of, I believe his name's pronounced Nisargadatta Maharaj, and someone asked him, he was often known as the smoking saint, smoked cigarettes, and he had a large following in India. And the funny thing about him was, his main question was, who is the meditator? So when he sat meditating, he was asked, what do you meditate on? And he said, I meditate on the question, who is meditating? Or even closer to the mark, what is meditating? And I heard Adyashanti refer to something about, sometimes we, in another talk, I heard him sometimes referring to meditation as the ultimate loafing. Like, if you're really going to loaf, then just sit and be with yourself. Sit and be with what comes up in you, and you start to see duality there. We, as awareness, become aware of thoughts arising and coming and going. We, as awareness, become aware of sensations in our body. And so there's this interesting thing around duality, is that it's inescapable, and yet there is part of us that is both always and already transcendent of it. How do I know that? Because I know there's something that's aware. And Ken Wilber once said, whatever you are aware of is not what you are. And I sat and pondered that for many years in my meditations. So I can become aware that there's a computer here. I can become that there's a listener out there. I can become aware that I am a man with a nose like this and eyebrows like this, and the awareness isn't attached to what it's aware of. Just like when you see there's a wall in front of you, you're not identified with being the wall, and so there's a part of us that's sort of a step back, if you will, as I feel it. And I used to call it, in moments that I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, the immensity looking out through my eyes. And to hear Adyashanti referring to this many years ago was somewhat startling to me, that someone else felt that way. It was very interesting. I remember walking around in college one day, and this thing seemed to come in and look out through my eyes, and voices would pop in like, oh, he's not quite really aware of what's going on here, and other voices would be like, oh, he's fine, and there would be this immense awareness. And I would notice on these days, maybe there were 10 or 20 in my life before I really became aware of what it is. And now that I'm aware of it, it doesn't really happen anymore, but it's interesting. But maybe there was a certain innocence there that I wasn't trying to analyze it and scrutinize it like perhaps now I am. And people would look at me funny. Like, I would often get what I call double takes or triple takes. Someone would look, and then I'd have this certain glow about me, it felt like, and then they'd look again, and I knew it wasn't me they were looking at, but they were probably feeling something about our mutual connection. And so in duality, things about duality is, we cannot escape that, here we are again, there's a top and a bottom. There's an in in and out. There is a dark and a light. There's a love and a hate. There's good feelings and bad feelings. There's hot and cold. And when I was studying Chinese medicine, it really helped my meditation practice in a way, because I started to get questioned and asked for homework to go and find the yin and the yang of the world. So if you really look around, you can see polar opposites in everything, in our body even, such as in health, we take in through our mouth, our nose, our eyes, we see, and we excrete in other ways, so we're taking in and getting out. And we have bone cells that are building bone constantly. We have bone cells that are tearing down bone constantly. And that's hence the talk the last few weeks about the immune system digestive, the building up versus the tearing down. We can never escape duality, nor would we want to, because the ego is our tool to navigate duality. So as a navigation device, that is its proper function. I put food in my mouth. That's how I know, through my ego. I don't put food in your mouth. In other words, if I didn't have an ego, I might very well starve to death by putting food in your mouth. So it's a good function of the ego. It's a tool. And so we want to use our tools skillfully. And so I spend my time trying to think about ways to use my tool more skillfully, not to try and figure out the nature of the universe or why God does things or why people do things, because as was pointed out to me once, God doesn't answer why questions. And I thought that was pretty profound, that we don't get our why questions answered. And so the question, who am I, was a way for me many years ago to sort of still the mind, because the question really can't be answered in the mind. It can only really be answered through the silence one receives back. And I had a profound moment at a silent retreat many years ago where I was exploring the question, what it felt like, and it felt like the question was a really sincere boomerang that went out like a sonar. Who am I? And then it was a 35-minute sitting meditation, and about 20 minutes later it was like, came back and it hit me on the top of my head, and it felt like my skull cracked open like an egg. And then I had this insight of when I was a young child, 4 or 5, and I used to talk to my invisible friends, and my mother thought that was a little weird. And here I was in this closet. I'd found this trap door to this old room. It's still mysterious to me that I'd found this trap door on the side of this closet, and I'd go into this small little room that no one was aware of except for me. I'd go in and I'd talk to my invisible friends, and I got all kinds of great advice and brotherhood, and I felt like I was understood, and things about life were making sense. And then one day I heard my mom running up the stairs, and so I tried to get out of the room as fast as I possibly could and seal up the trap door, because I inherently knew that it was all over once I got found out. And that was the fateful day that she asked me who I was talking to, and I said, my invisible friends. And she said, you're going to sound a bit crazy if you keep doing that. And I think that it was considered socially unacceptable, and maybe still is, to talk to invisible things that other people can't see. But nevertheless, I was aware of something. And I still to this day don't think I was crazy. And so there I was at this retreat, and realizing that this yearning I'd had in my heart, and this feeling of separation that had been around, I was age 5 to roughly age 35 for 30 years, and the boomerang came back, and I realized that it wasn't me that was yearning for peace, or me yearning for enlightenment, or me yearning for God. I realized that it was the other side. It was a cue back to me of never losing this thread of connection to what it was I really was. And it didn't matter whether they were invisible beings or psychic channels or guardian angels or any of that crap. It was just that feeling inside of yearn was the connection that kept me sort of going, and it kept prodding me along my path to search for enlightenment and be the seeker and strive. And it was a very beautiful, beautiful moment that of also a horrible moment of grief and loss, that part of my mind had said to myself, you spent 30 years denying this, and what a bunch of wasted time. And I just fell apart at this silent retreat for 5 days, and if I hadn't had my wonderful girlfriend at the time with me, I don't know if I would have made it through the retreat, gone home, because I was so distraught and so joyful of the polarity. of the two at the same time. It was a very unusual feeling for a few days. But I used to say I felt like I cracked open like an egg, and a bit of truth came in, and it was a very beautiful time in my life afterwards for a few weeks where I just felt liberated. And it led to another time in my life where I couldn't own my humanity. I was in this transcendent state of referring to myself in third person. Oh, there are feelings here, and I don't have to own any of that because I'm not my body, and my invisible friends are guiding me, and powers above and beyond this realm are guiding me. And talking through another time in my life of what Jesus may have called the 30 days or 40 days in the desert, because after a while the joy of it faded to sort of an empty gray feeling of feeling disassociated and detached, and the deep passion and the joy of being human had sort of diminished, and the downs weren't there either. I would term it sort of like being on Zoloft or an antidepressant, where there's sort of a middle ground but not a lot of highs and lows. And that might be good for some people, and I do feel like the duality, the extremes of duality, the extremes of Maya can be a bit much for us to acknowledge at times, and so we might want to take a break and go into a little hole with some antidepressants or something to regulate that out. And then we need to come back, and as one of my teachers at the time said, you need to come back and own your humanity now, and that was roughly 7 or 8 years ago. I spent the last 7 or 8 years finding my humanity again, and finding the passion of embodying what I saw. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, talking to you about duality. Is it's not something to be avoided, and we're not something we should transcend, in my opinion. It's our body is our sacred vessel for consciousness, and I believe we'll be having these conversations as a society and as a species much more in the future, and learning ways to relate with each other and with ourselves, coming from this place in the heart and not so much in the storyteller up here and believing all the crap that we're downloaded by the media and the powers that be. I believe that where we're headed is amazing, and we just have to band together and not try and transcend, but to fully embody in the joy of what it is to be in a body, and then live the statement, perhaps someday, that we cannot transcend that which we've never fully occupied. And I love, that's a great point for me. We cannot transcend that which we've never fully occupied. And so for me, I'm fully occupying my sexuality. I'm fully occupying my humanity. I'm fully occupying sometimes my lack of desire to even be motivated. Fully occupying my passion to serve. Fully occupying and really being invested in being here with a certain deep sincerity and curiosity that's natural and uncontrived. I like the word enthusiasm as a pointer here, in theos, in God. That's to me is the real pointer, in that when I'm relating with others through my men's work and the Mankind Project, my mission statement is I create a world of harmony by connecting. And so for me, my inner world of harmony is a pointer that when I feel in harmony inside, it's because I'm either connecting with myself deeply, I'm connecting with others, with nature, and the pointer from the Gospels is let thine eye be single. And that pointer at let thine eye be single is a pointer at there's no me and other, there's just one thing happening. And I know when that's happening in me, that's my marker of, or pointer of health. And so that's my send away for all of you on week 12 is, what are you? What are we? And can we find this place that's always and already present of connection? Where we don't, if we try and summon it, we've reduced it. If we try and label it, we've reduced it. If we try and be it, we've gone too far. And there's the great paradox that we see in spirituality, is to just let things be as they are and move from there and not force ourselves into something that we may not be ready for. I know that I may have, but it's all fine now, and I may have forced myself into things a bit earlier than I was ready for, but even that's a judgment, and it was what it was, and things are what they are. And so I think that there's a certain sense inside us of ease when we're following the Tao, so to speak, and surrendering and letting it lead instead of us trying to take the reins, because ultimately everything is perfectly managed in the unborn, great Zen saying. Everything is perfectly managed in the unborn. The creek doesn't need us to divert it. The ocean waves don't need us to control it. Our diet doesn't need 3,000 synthetic supplements made by a man. We can do quite well with things from nature. And sure, we can find concentrates and things to make up for the lack of what's been done to us debatably over the last couple hundred years by certain greedy and power-corrupt individuals, but we can still make up for that, and we can still love, and not go into a vision of the duality of they've caused this, because ultimately the ones who cannot feel and still use and abuse and rule this plane will be and still be loved. Craig Lane with Health Alchemy, signing out. Week 12. Duality. HealthAlchemy, healthalchemy.com.